This month, we're looking at the topic, The Peacemaker Has Come. And I'd like to engage you for a moment by encouraging you to engage with some people around you for a moment. As you think about your mental state, all that's going on in the world, what's troubling you right now? So that's what I want you to ask. That's why I had you introduce yourself so you could be familiar. So I want you to ask the person next to you, what's troubling you right now? And then pause for them to respond. Go ahead. Online, if you can raise the question, what's troubling you right now? All right. There's some of you all respond, me too, me too. All right. Give you about 10 more seconds, 10 more seconds. All right. Here's the second question. Rephrased. Second question is, what's robbing you of your peace? Come on. I'll give you about a minute. What's robbing you of your peace? Y'all stop talking to each other. You're like, I ain't come to church to talk to them. What's robbing you of your peace? Online, I hope you're posting. What's robbing you of your peace? All right. That went a lot quicker. Okay. Here's the third question. You don't have to talk to anybody. Here's the third question. Why? Why is it robbing you of your peace? Why? You don't have to answer anybody else, but I'd like for you to answer yourself. Why? Whatever is robbing you of your peace, why is it robbing you of your peace? This morning, I want to lift up a verse from Isaiah chapter 6, chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. I'll read it to you right now, and then I want to talk about it for a minute using the three questions that I just raised as a backdrop. In Isaiah chapter 9, beginning at verse 6, as we prepare for the arrival of Christ, the celebration of the birth of Christ. Some of you may have heard the verse before, some of you may not have heard it. Listen to what Isaiah, a prophet of God, which means that God chose him to speak on his behalf. God chose him to speak on his behalf, and then when God chose him, God told him, the people are not going to listen to you. I know, isn't that funny? I want you to speak for me, but please know they're not going to listen to you. Their hearts are hardened. Isaiah 9, verse 6 says, "For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God." This translation says Eternal Father. Some translations say Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Verse 7 says, "The dominion will be vast and its Prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now and forever. The zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. Isaiah 9. Isaiah 9 and 6 is a powerful promise that's spoken in the midst of a time of chaos. For many of us, because we're all human, as we look at our world today, it is potentially easy to become overwhelmed with the various headlines that are bombarding us with stories again and again of wars and the devastation of wars, of loss of life, the various threats that are occurring globally, of disasters, natural disasters like floods and earthquakes that are impacting real people in real time. As we listen to concern about tariffs and what that may or may not mean, as we wrestle with concerns of economic uncertainty for ourselves, many have lost their jobs, and even though they really have been looking for a job, have not been able to find a job, which means they've lost insurance and they've lost the ability to provide in the way that they were accustomed to providing. Many families are struggling to meet some of their basic needs. Communities are fractured, people are angry, fear is on the rise, and it often feels as though for many of us, fear is the dominant emotion of our lives. And it's not just the big issues, it's also the smaller personal issues. Even though we've been talking about resolving conflict in relationships, the strain of relationships that some of us just experienced during the Thanksgiving holidays. For others, it's the weight of depression or anxiety or the constant pressure to measure up. We're surrounded by external threats and weighed down by internal struggle. And oftentimes we can't help but wonder, is peace even possible? Is it even possible? But I want you to know this morning that this question isn't a new question. In 8th century BC, the people of Judah asked the same question. They were surrounded by chaos. They were being threatened by powerful enemies, experiencing internal struggles, dealing with injustice and spiritual decay. And into that darkness, Isaiah spoke a message of hope. He declared that there would be a child born, a son given, who would bring peace. Isaiah's prophecy doesn't just speak to his time. It echoes through the ages, reminding us that God sees the chaos in the world. Not only does God see the chaos, but God has a plan to address the chaos. It reminds us that God knows our fears. He is aware of our anxiety. He is aware of the things that are robbing us of our peace, and He is aware of why we've allowed those things to rob us of peace. And yet, God gives a promise to Isaiah and a promise to us of peace. But do we actually believe that God's promise is not an empty promise? Or do we question whether or not God is faithful to keep His promise? You see, as you look at what's going on as Isaiah writes, it's important to know the specific details. Externally, there is a nation called the Assyrians who are expanding their empire aggressively. They are crushing smaller nations. They have a reputation of not only defeating their enemies, but doing unthinkable things to their enemies in the process of defeating them. Judah's very survival at this point is at stake. And because of their concern, the king at the time decides it's better to make allegiances with other countries, with other political powers, so that they might have an advantage. And like the people of Judah, as we deal with all that we deal with, whether external or internal, many of us are wrestling with fear, we're wrestling with doubt, and there is a temptation, sometimes subtle and sometimes not so subtle, to place our trust in other places rather than to trust God. And the challenge that Isaiah offers, the promise that he delivers, is a promise to anchor them in the fact that God is a God who can be trusted, that God is a God who will not abandon us, that God is a God who will not forsake us. And just as God promised peace during the dark times of Judah, as Isaiah writes, God promised peace for us, and that peace shows up in a person. So let me take a few moments and talk about why the promise of peace. Next week, we'll look in Luke chapter 2 and highlight the significance of the person, the arrival of Jesus, and the celebration of peace on the earth. But today, I just want to talk about hearing the promise, wrestling with the promise, and why it's important for us to anchor ourselves in the promise. Why a promise of peace? A promise of peace, first of all, because as stated, God knows our temptation to trust human power. God knows that we are tempted as human beings to place our trust in other things other than God. The nation of Israel wanted to place their trust in other powers, other governments, other world leaders, believing that if they could just hook up with the right one, that the right one would come in and issue policies on their behalf. If they could just hook up with the right one instead of God, that they would somehow be protected, that they would be safe. You see, the temptation that we have oftentimes is to place our confidence everywhere else other than in God. Think about it. Oftentimes, we place our confidence in political leaders. We place our confidence in our jobs. We place our confidence in people that we're in relationship with. We place our confidence, though we don't admit it a whole lot, in ourselves. We believe that we need to look to everybody else, everything else, everywhere else to fix the things that are causing us trouble. Look to everything else, everybody else, everywhere else to address the things that are robbing us of our peace. And oftentimes, it's not until somebody asks, well, have you prayed about it? That question like, well, I'm going to get there. I've been doing everything I know to do. I've been calling all the people I know to call. I've been trying to work it out on my own, but I haven't prayed yet, which becomes a reminder that we can easily become accustomed to place our confidence in that which is visible, that which is tangible, and that which is immediate. But Isaiah wants to remind us, as he reminds Israel, Judah, that God is the only one who can give peace that can sustain you in all situations. The reminder of Scripture is that trusting in human power is like building a house on sinking sand. It may seem solid for a while, but it won't really hold when the storms come. And my encouragement to many of us on today, as we think about what's troubling us, as we think about what's robbing us of our peace, I would ask us to consider, then where have you placed your trust? If something is troubling you, have you placed your trust in something or somebody who can't address what's troubling you? If something is robbing you of your peace, have you placed your trust or confidence in something or someone that can't keep you in perfect peace when you keep your mind stayed on Him? That's Scripture, y'all. So we wrestle with this temptation to trust in everything else other than God, thus the need for a promise of peace. Here's my second point. Why a promise of peace? A promise of peace because we often forget the consequences of misplaced trust. Judah's decision to trust Assyria didn't solve their problems. It made it worse. Assyria's influence grew, and Judah became more vulnerable and oppressed. What seemed like a solution turned into a source of greater instability. And the same is true for us. Oftentimes, when we place our trust in the wrong places, in the wrong people, in the wrong things, we discover, oh, they're not capable of handling this. And as a result, there are consequences. Consequences can be good, and consequences can be bad. But there are consequences to placing our trust in people, places, and things that are not suitable to handle the situations that we are dealing with. Sometimes that consequence leads to greater frustration. Sometimes it can be anger. Sometimes it can be bitterness. Sometimes it can be resentment. The reminder is that when we trust anybody other than God for our peace, it will always disappoint. I'll pause to allow us to ponder that. Ponder situations, circumstances, times when you've anchored yourself to something, somebody other than God, and discovered this is not what I thought it was. It didn't work out the way I thought it would work out. And the impact that it had upon you. Wait, not just on you, but then how you turned and viewed God differently. As though God was somehow responsible for the choice you made when it was your choice. The good news of the text is that even when we make the wrong choice, place our faith, our hope, our confidence in the wrong person, place, or thing, God promises still remain true. He will never leave us nor forsake us. You see, it's good to know that even when you place your trust in somebody, in something, in some power that is not God, when it goes wrong, God doesn't say, tough luck. You on your own. God responds to say, you are still my child, and I still love you, and I still got your back. Isn't that good news to somebody today? Somebody who knows what it's like to again and again try other things and other places and other people And again, when you come to yourself and you look to God, you discover that God was right there all the time. So I raise the question this morning, are you learning the lessons from placing your trust in the wrong place? Are we learning the lessons from leaning and depending on anything, anybody other than God? My third point, and then I'm in my seat. Thus, the promise. I won't unpack it today because we'll spend time next week, but I do want to highlight the significance of it. In Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 2, the word says, the people are walking in darkness have seen a great light. What Isaiah is doing for them is saying, hey, I know your current experience, but I want you to understand that light has come to you because of this promise that God is giving you in the midst of your dark experience. And that's when he reveals, for a child will be born for us, a son will be given for us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Some were thinking, maybe as they heard that prophetic word, maybe he's talking about somebody who's going to be born during our day. But then as they begin to focus on the titles associated with this child that is born and this son that is given, they're like, nah, this can't be just a human being, because a child being born and a son given speaks to divinity in humanity. So we're not just talking about somebody's normal baby boy. We're talking about divinity showing up wrapped in humanity. So when they hear Wonderful Counselor, please know they're hearing, oh, God is giving us a promise that one is going to come despite what we're dealing with, despite the darkness that we're facing. And the one who comes is going to be a counselor like no other. He's going to have wisdom and guidance and understanding that surpasses human understanding. He's going to be a mighty God, which means he's going to be powerful enough to address anything and everything, that his power will be able to come up against all that we could imagine that could destroy us. He's not only that, but he's going to be an everlasting Father, that he's going to be an eternal being, one who rules for all time, and then he anchors it with the Prince of Peace. Hear the promise of peace, and I'll anchor here and then let you go. When he says he's going to be the Prince of Peace, he's not just talking about he's going to be the Prince of Peace in that when he comes, he will be a leader and a ruler that will make sure that there is no war. No, the word for peace means much more than that. The word for peace here communicates the idea of completion or wholeness. The word for peace here communicates the idea of something that has a whole bunch of complex parts, and somehow in the midst of the complexity of the thing, those parts have been separated and are no longer whole. But when he comes, the Prince of Peace, he's going to bring everything back together so that it will be whole. He's going to restore it to make it whole. Peace, not just restoration, but peace as they describe it amongst the Hebrew people. It's a peace that is a well-being. So it's bringing things together that are complex, that were broken, but now they're restored so that they all fit together, work together, and they are better because they fit together and work together. They are at their best because they fit together and work together. So he's going to be the Prince of Peace. So completion, wholeness, well-being. The one who is going to come is going to bring about a peace that restores things, that makes things right, but makes things better and causes things to work better together and cause them to have well-being. Hear the promise of the Prince of Peace, that there is one who is coming, who is not just going to stop wars, but even in the midst of war, he's going to restore you so that you got your well-being, you got your wits about you, knowing that everything's all right because he is the Prince of Peace. So even in the midst of darkness, he's still shining bright as a light. You don't need the absence of darkness to know that he's the Prince of Peace, because even in darkness, he shines bright enough that the darkness doesn't have to impact you or affect you. You still can see clearly because you are connected to the Prince of Peace. Hear the promise. The promise is that there is one who is coming who will be a Prince of Peace. I won't get ahead of myself. Next week, we'll talk about Jesus being that one who has come, who is the Prince of Peace. And we'll talk about the significance of him being the Prince of Peace, not just for you, but him being the Prince of Peace for the world. But so that I don't get ahead of myself, let me just anchor us here as we prepare to close out. Bottom line is, when you understand that your peace is in Jesus, because Jesus does not change, your peace shouldn't change. I just want to leave you there, right? I know, so I understand that there are things that are easier said than done, right? Because just because it's said and you hear it, don't mean you've unraveled all the other stuff that you believed before you heard that, right? Which means I got to unpack all that other stuff to really anchor myself in the fact that because Jesus is the Prince of Peace, the one who restores, the one who makes whole, the one who brings about well-being, the one who is in control of everything, then since the Prince of Peace never changes, my peace never has to change. That's a loaded statement. What's troubling you, whatever it is Jesus still the Prince of Peace? And if he is the Prince of Peace, who is the ruler of the world? We say a whole bunch of stuff in church, but living it out, anchoring ourselves in it, becomes another thing. Who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? Right? If he really is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, what's troubling you? And since he is the same, why is what's troubling you? When you can take what's troubling you to the one who controls trouble. Right? So if he is the Prince of Peace and he does not change, then what's robbing you of your peace? Hear me. If something is robbing you of your peace is something other than Jesus. Because can't nobody take Jesus. Come on, somebody. In order for them to rob you of your peace got to be in somebody other than Jesus, because folk can't take Jesus from you. So if I'm being robbed of my peace, then I got to wrestle with, where am I anchoring myself for peace? Because Jesus remains the same. Then when I anchor myself in him, the whole world could literally fall apart. And because I'm anchored in Jesus, I can still be at peace. So my prayer for us, because we are human beings and we struggle, is over this next month, let's try to anchor ourselves a little bit more in Jesus, who is our peace. And every time we sense something troubling us, and I get it, doctor's report, children, family members, right? Every time we sense it troubling us, let's go back to the one who is the Prince of Peace and say, King Jesus, you know about all that. And because you know about all of that, can you give me a peace that surpasses all understanding, that can guard my heart and my mind? Because you know about all that. Let's anchor ourselves in our Prince of Peace.